And here is our online module on positive behavior interventions and supports, which is PBIS, and also on working with trauma. I always like to start out with this quote, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You're the one who gets burned. And that is oftentimes what we see in classrooms. We've got these kids who are holding so much emotion inside of them that it actually is mostly them that ends up getting hurt. But it's part of our job to really do what we can to help support them so that they're not getting hurt, nor is anyone else. As we went over in class, we've got the externalizing and internalizing mental health problems that we usually see in schools. The externalizing ones being oppositional behaviors, conduct, disruptive behaviors, hyperactivity, impulsivity, substance abuse, whereas the internalizing ones are seen more as anxiety, depression, trauma, and also substance abuse there too. A lot of times these kids are self-medicating, and that's where their substance abuse issues come from. And as we went over in class as well, I just wanted to remind you that, a lot of the things that we've always done around behavior supports don't work that well. And so, being punitive, referring them to outside therapy, meeting with students, analyzing strengths and needs, all of those things haven't really found the biggest effect size, but we do know that other things do work, like PBIS, like social emotional learning and social skills, proactive class management, supplemental academic instruction, and behavior contracting. Also the formative evaluation plus graphing plus reinforcement. So there are a lot of things that are effective out there, and so we just need to do our best to work with our school sites in making sure that those are the things we're doing. We went through the activity in class on the school-wide positive behavior interventions and supports, and we talked about how most kids, about 80% of kids, will do fine with school-wide interventions. So that's PBIS, that's the social emotional learning curriculum, good behavior game, proactive classroom management. And then you have the next group that's about 10 to 25%, depending on the school, that have some additional supports that need to be done for them. So this is when you would use the behavior contracting, the self-monitoring, maybe a school-to-home communication, a mentor-based program, class pass intervention, or positive peer reporting. So those are just some kids who will have that second tier, just a little bit more intensity. And then really it's only 3 to 5% that are really at risk, high risk. And then for these students, we do a functional behavior intervention plan based on a functional behavior analysis. That's what the FBA is. We do replacement behavior training, and we probably have some sort of home and school or home and community supports. So I wanted to show you 3 websites that I have found are really helpful that you can go to. One of them I've already gone through with you, and that's the PBIS World. And let's just go here. There we go. And this is the one where, remember, we went through and we found the you choose a behavior and then click on that, and then it goes through and it defines it. If that's the student, then you click yes, and then here's a bunch of tier 1 interventions. You can find more of them there, and also move on to tier 2 or tier 3. They have data tracking sheets as well. The next one, whoops, not that. The next one is the pent.gov, ca.gov. And this one I like because they have some really great forms that you can use. So if you're one of the people that was like, well, how do we get all this information? Then it could be this website that you might look into. And so, you can pull this one. That's just, once again, has some of the options that you have. One of the other ones I like is the, where did it go? The rubric for evaluating an FBA report. That one might be good just to make sure you have everything that you might need for it. There's the potential reinforcers. Oh, it's over here. Interview and observation form. So it just kind of goes through and gives you some questions that you can ask. And yeah, and there's a lot of other really great things. So we can scroll down. We've got data collection, we've got charting, we've got progress monitoring. There's discipline that they go over here, and also accommodations. A few of you guys asked me about accommodations, so this is a good resource to go to as well. So here's a notification for teacher responsibility on accommodations that is kind of nice. Let me just pull this over. Oops, there we go. And you can see that it, goes through and says, what it is that you're asking as for support for the child and everything. So that's a good option. And it's just a good conversation starter. So that's another one. And then the last one is PBIS.org, and you can see I took a screenshot of each one of these as well. Whoops. And on this one, it's actually got some really great resources. Well, for positive behavior interventions and supports for the school, family, community, evaluation, training. Some of you were asking, should you be getting training and paying for that yourself? And that's not a bad idea, because any training you get, you can put on your resume, and that's always helpful. But I would look at the research behind the website or the training. But yeah, so they go through and they've got like the school-wide positive behavior interventions and supports for beginners, and they talk about how you can set that up in your school. They have a bunch of videos as well that are really fantastic to watch. We've got some exemplars from the field. So all of these are good tools to also use as you're learning more about PBIS. So the next thing I wanted to go through, is to really talk to you about what it is that happens to kids when they're going through a stressful situation. So I wanted to talk to you about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So when you're sympathetic, your stress body is going through, you can see we've got the pupils expanded, fast and shallow breath, your heart pumps faster, and your gut actually becomes inactive because you're trying to save all your energy. Whereas when you're calm, look at that, your gut is working just fine, your heart slows down, you have some slow deep breaths, and your pupils shrink. So it's just a good one, because sometimes you can actually notice ahead of time if you see a student who is struggling. This next chart is around a healthy nervous system, and I like to use this one because you can see that, yeah, we do get aroused and stressed every once in a while, and then we kind of come down and we go up and down throughout the day. Maybe you heard some shocking news or got a surprising text or something, and then later on you're able to kind of reflect on that, you calm down, and you kind of go up and down throughout the day. But what happens is if a nervous system is activated a lot, then it kind of goes through, and you've got the activation, and then you kind of calm down, you rest, and then you have another traumatic event, and you're already in this heightened state, and then you shoot up, and you're in either you can see the fight, flight, or freeze mode, right? And then it takes a while for your body to kind of come back down into the normal range. You do hit that, but you tend to go back up and down. And so it's just really important to think about that for yourself when there's possibly like a fight or something in your classroom, and then also for your students as they're dealing with any sort of stressful situation. So here's a graph that I like. So this one is the mild stressor. Once again, you've got, this is the sympathetic, so the stress one, and then the parasympathetic, the calm. So you can see when the stress hits, a mild stress hits, then, oh, yes, your parasympathetic goes down a bit, your sympathetic goes up a bit, but then they kind of come together and they rebound. So they shift to the other side and then they return to normal. So that's for mild acute stress reaction. For chronic stress reaction, you can see when this moderate stress hits, this sympathetic, by the way, is right down here, and it spikes up, and then it slowly comes down. Now remember that the last one actually crossed over right here. So this one goes up, this one goes down, right? Whoops. Whereas here, one goes up and it does come down, but it never actually crosses over, and this one never goes above here. So it's a strong sympathetic stress response, and this is inadequate proportion of all of these different arousal pieces kind of spiking in your system. And there is sometimes a failure to recover to normal. And that is the thing that we have to worry about with our students. And also the parasympathetic, it just, it calms down, but it never really gives the body a chance to get back to where it needed to be. Now here's for traumatic stress response. Now this is somebody who's really dealing with some sort of trauma. And remember, kids or youth or humans who have dealt with a lot of trauma actually have recurrences of that trauma with something that isn't exactly the same size. So it's that post-traumatic stress disorder that I'm sure you've heard about. And so here we've got the trauma hits, right? And immediately, even higher up, we've got this sympathetic, but also watch this, the parasympathetic also comes up. And so this is when both of these are going up and both of these are going down, and it's this continuing erratic and extreme reactions to things. And you'll see that a lot with students who, like I said, have dealt with a lot of different stress pieces. Like they almost look like they're really struggling, and then they're fine, and then they're okay. And then they're mad again, and everything is just very extreme. So I put all three of those graphs together so you could see them, the acute stress, the chronic stress, and the traumatic stress. And you can see that there's a huge difference in how high up and how extreme each one of these go. So just keeping that in mind as you're working with your kids. The other thing I like to point out, actually, when this happens is if there is a fight in your classroom or some sort of traumatic experience in your classroom, then all of these different responses are going to have an effect on exactly, how the student maybe says that the fight happened, or and for you as well, like as you're trying to kind of calm down after this traumatic experience has happened in your classroom. And so your thought process isn't as clear if you're in one of these extreme cases, right? You have to kind of like allow yourself to kind of come down from that before you move on. So what do you do when you have these stressful situations arise in your classroom? One, like I said, you want to de-escalate the situation. You want to alert appropriate support personnel. So this is the principal or vice or security, other teachers, it could be parents, and then get everyone to a safe place. So, stabilize the room. So there's been times where I've had to have all the students evacuate my room and go to another place. And then other times where I was able to, get a student who was really struggling outside of the room so that they weren't making an unsafe environment for everyone else. So figure out what that means for that situation, and then proceed in the best way possible. Then you want to give yourself some time to kind of reorient, you and also all the participants. So your students who were there and they were part of that stressful situation, you guys all need to kind of calm down, and then you also need to write your report as soon as possible. And one of the things that ends up happening with all of these chemicals and all the stress in your body is that you end up forgetting some details. So trying to, like, even in the moment, maybe write down some notes so that you can remember all of these things. So the two readings I asked you, or I'm asking you to do this week, are one is Helping Traumatized Children Learn, and then and I just took out part of that book, and then I took out a chapter from Eric Jensen's Engaging Students with Poverty in Mind. And here they go through, kind of how trauma affects learning. They have trauma and behavior, so they talk about well, actually, no, this one is I'm going to tell you about, but one of the things that we know about human behavior is that if we believe that a child has complete control over their behavior, we are actually more likely to be angry with them if their behavior is inappropriate. So an example of this that I want you to just watch out for with yourself and possibly your colleagues is if you have a student who's more on the moderate to severe disability range and they look different. Maybe they don't have appropriate speech and things like that, then people are a lot easier on these kids than a student that maybe has the emotional disturbance or traumatic brain injury or maybe even a processing issue. Who looks like, their non-disabled peers. And that's a really tough thing. And so these kids who look like they wouldn't react strongly to something are sometimes, as far as really supporting the kid in a stressful situation, we forget to do that because they look like the kind of kid that should be able to take care of themselves. So just keeping that in mind. And then also, you want to avoid triggering your students. And so, just being very conscious about how we're working with students on, social cues. If we see something like aggression or withdrawal or even perfectionism, that we address those things right away, because a lot of times those can be an alert to us that we need to give some extra support. I just wanted to briefly go over kind of the academic instruction that, you know, uh, there are a lot of things that we can do to, and we can predict as far as the students go. Um, we know sometimes if the timing of our lessons or activities are too quick, then that can be really frustrating to someone who's dealing with some sort of emotional unevenness, right? Or if we transition too quickly, if we don't make a safe place, or if we don't follow what's in the IEP or the 504 plan, then all of these things can affect our students. And so, making sure that we are doing our best to show up and support our students is really important. And then also consistency with classmates. Structure helps kids who have dealt with trauma, pain, um, chaotic or unpredictable environments. And so the more that we can set out our expectations, follow those expectations, and create a place where the students know what to expect from us. And then, of course, the positive behavior supports, which we've been talking about in class and are in your textbook as well. Some other supports, so, making sure that you are using, for example, UDL. So you have a lot of approaches to your curriculum and instruction that will help support students so they're not getting frustrated. And then also, we talked about this in class, but the importance of school-wide behavior support. And when we look at the most effective schools, they are consistent with rules. All of the teachers are following all the rules, and they're modeling respect. They're talking about safety plans of what to do. So when I had to exit my students and have them go to another room and evacuate my classroom, we had already talked about the fact that that would be one of the ways that we would deal with a student, if he or she were refusing to leave the classroom, then the entire class would leave. And we talked about that many times. So when the time actually came where this was coming up, then all of the students knew that, okay, listen, it looks like we're going to have to, go to another classroom. All of the students picked up their stuff and they were ready to go because this was something that we had gone over as part of our plan. Just in the engaging students with poverty in mind, so this is the Jensen book, and I would have loved to have had you guys read this whole book, but I also know about your cognitive overload and cognitive capacity being not at the level where you can just read everything. So what I did here was I just took this little screenshot of the book, and it talks about the connecting engagement factors. So one being around vocabulary. So training students' brains and memory and working memory helps them actually retain vocabulary. I know we have in special ed, we have a ton of acronyms. And so I try to always sneak those acronyms in and talk about them multiple times so that you guys can, all the general ed teachers can also get used to all the acronyms that we teach or we talk about in special ed. Now, that being said, on my special educators, it would be really helpful if you can, make sure to actually use and explain all the jargon that we use in special ed as often as possible. The other thing that Jensen talks about is mindset. So this is communicating to students that their cognitive capacity is not fixed, and that creates the growth mindset that allows them to dream of doing even better. So really bringing up mindset to the students, working with them on pushing out of their comfort zones and continually challenging themselves to do better, think better, try harder, but not just try harder, but try in a different way if something's not coming naturally. And then, of course, cognitive capacity, which is teaching and reinforcing core cognitive skills to lay the groundwork for further learning. I've talked to you guys about how if you are at cognitive overload, then that means that you're not really taking much in. That's one of the reasons I also do the videos for you, is that I know that you won't be able to hear all this in class. So hopefully a time later on you can sit down where it's quiet and you haven't been working and going to class, for so many hours, and then you can go through and listen to these presentations and still get the important information. And then the last thing to keep in mind is stress level. So learning skills like self-control and goal setting clarifies behavioral expectations and classroom processes and shows students that they have control over their actions and certain outcomes. So which reduces the stress and creates a sense of self-efficacy. And also, I would say resilience. Yes, we all go through stressful times, and stress isn't always a bad thing. So that just making sure that we're talking to our students explicitly about how they can work through those things. So next I have engage to build cognitive capacity, and this is the chapter I'm having you read is on cognitive capacity, and they go through 5 different things that we can do. So one is building attention skills, another one is teaching problem solving and critical thinking, training your working memory, developing processing speed, and fostering self-control. I chose this topic for 2 reasons. One, I think it's helpful for all of us to be reminded of how we can also build our cognitive capacity. I know you guys have a lot of information coming in, so I hope that, reviewing this chapter and really going through some of the recommendations that Jensen put together will also help you as you move forward with your program. Next, I talked about in the beginning another one of the positive and effective behavior support systems or frameworks is social emotional learning. And I like this handout right here, and it's got the social emotional learning in the center. And then what is that? It's self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, social awareness, and I can't remember if I said self-awareness, but you can see that it all goes through that. And then where are you getting this? In the classroom. It starts in the classroom, in the schools, home and community. They actually have a lot of curriculum that they've set up. The castle has, but there's also things that you can find, some on the internet, and also design with your students if you wanted to. It's school-wide practices and policies, and of course, using those family and community partnerships. I'm not going to go through this too much, except for I would love you to take a moment to just kind of put this on pause. And then I've also uploaded this sheet as well onto the module, so you can take a look at this or take it with you. But you can see that, the more that we teach our students, uh, they've broken down all of these different elements, and then the more that we explicitly teach those skills, then the better for our students. So I just wanted to show you a few other things. So I want to circle back to some of the reasons that, or common reasons that students might misbehave. And this will also allow us to really think about how we're planning and supporting our students in our class. And so one is, if students don't know expectations, and I know you guys have felt this as well, then it gets really frustrating. If they don't know how to exhibit the expected behavior, if they're unaware that they've engaged in misbehavior, or if misbehavior is providing students with some sort of desired outcome. So this could be attention from adults or peers, or maybe an escape from a difficult task or non-desired activity. And here's the document that we went over in class that I gave to you, but I really like this one because it talks about the aids, accommodations, and modifications for Tier 1. You can see that there was a lot of them that are there, but, going back and, I found this on the internet when I was looking at for RTI Tier 1 interventions, and it came up. And so, really going out and seeing what kind of supports are out there is a great way to take a look and learn more. This one is an environmental analysis summary of observations. So this is, you can figure out, what it is that's going on for the student if they've got some sort of behavior. And then these different triggers actually be removed. And so I like this because it allows you as the support person to say, like, okay, well, am I giving enough independence? What about participation or social interactions? And is there a student who might need me to change kind of how I'm doing things to support them in a more effective manner? The other thing is, and I went over this in class, but I just want to go over it again because I think this is really helpful. This is the practices by age and domain. So this is the how you read this. So E is elementary. Now I'm forgetting. Middle school and high school, and okay, so sorry about that. It's early childhood, elementary, and middle and high school. So you can see, okay, if I'm looking at play, so I want to teach play, then I would do that in early childhood or elementary, but you can see middle and high school, that's not really, that's not one of the areas that you would look at. And then here's some ways to teach that. One is discrete trial training, another one is parent implemented interventions, another one is pivotal response training, and you can just go down. You can see self-management actually covers all ages, and all domains. So that's pretty interesting, as do visual supports. So that's pretty good. And the last little section I want to show you is, so after you read the Helping Traumatized Children Learn, there's 2 questions I want you to answer. And then after you read Engage to Build Cognitive Capacity, there's 2 questions I want you to answer. And then this week's feedback is, what do you think of the online modules? What do you like? What don't you like? Would you prefer to stay in class longer or continue to have online modules? So there we go. This is our week. So please let me know if you have any questions. I am here to support.